I have decidedly learned that I am terrible at keeping secrets, and I should just avoid having any for the principle of it. So I've been working on a big project, and by working on, I mean just starting, and I'll never be perfect again, so we're gonna talk about it, because, uh, I am so stressed about it before it even begins. And I mean, it has begun, because I'm starting to make notes and stuff. I find I'm motivated by two very basic emotions. I am motivated either by crippling, overwhelming fear, or I am motivated by shame. And when I say motivated, I mean what pushes me to make the majority of my day-to-day and long-term decisions. I don't feel like either of those are emotions that I want to be the driving force behind any decisions I make about what I make, about what I do, about what I pursue. There's my baby boy. He's actually getting outside time now because it's really warm out here, so he's really enjoying the outside, and you will probably hear him discover creatures that he believes shouldn't be in our yard, but are anyway. So I did technically talk about it in another shorter video a while ago. I'm working on a project that is deeply important to me. I don't know. I don't know how to talk about this. I don't know how to untangle everything that I'm feeling about this. I feel like when I first started making YouTube videos, a lot of the appeal for how I started and with my other channel, it was kind of my first step at trying to be motivated by something other than fear or shame, I think. I think when you grow up not being accepted by your peers or church or family group, it's very easy to be it's very easy for that kind of existential fear of not being good enough or not belonging or not doing something that matters, or I don't know, a lot of overlaying fears. But I think it can become really easy to be primarily motivated by fear as the driving force behind why you either do or don't pursue something. There can be a fear in not being able to pull out your best work. A fear of just basic rejection of something you're trying to do. It can be easy to feel more driven by this panic of not being good enough, rather than being driven by the excitement of seeing what you could do when you put your focus and energy and hard work into something. And I think shame is often a subset of fear. A lot of emotions are secondary or actually kind of a derivative of another emotion. I think shame can be kind of a secondary of a lot of things, but I think shame is most often secondary to fear and disgust. If we're going by the little therapy wheel, emotion wheel. I have such a problem with fear and shame that sometimes I don't even have words to communicate, which makes it very hard to talk about an issue for a video. I already want to stop the video and start it over because I'm dancing around the topic without talking about it as I usually do. And I think fear and shame comes down to more than just certain types of upbringing. I think there are certain identities that hold shame differently than possibly some others. In third grade, I wrote my first book. It was a short story, really. And it was called A is for Autism because my sister, whom you've seen on a couple shorts, is autistic. Grew up autistic to a level that it did impact schooling and deeply impacted social function. And I remember writing that story as kind of... I was often very, very frustrated by the way her peers treated her. I remember being in elementary school and we'd all go to recess and I'd just feel like, an impact behind me and I'd, turn around and she's just clinging to my waist from behind, just crying because of some shit kids were saying or doing. And so I remember when I wrote that story, it felt like I was able to explain an experience of someone I deeply loved and cared about in a way that I hoped would make sense to kids who couldn't understand why she was different. And that was kind of my first full story. And often when you grow up a very religious child, very, very gung-ho about the God thing, which is what I was. They kind of teach you everything you do should be a reflection of God and his purpose for you. They kind of drill it into your head that whatever you do should worship God in some way or another. That was really, really pounded into my head with my writing, because I wanted to be an actor, but that got squashed pretty quick as just non-viable. And so writing was kind of the thing that I latched onto for a long time, as, I guess, a way that I felt I could have some kind of impact on whatever. Again, that first story was mostly just for other kids who would watch my sister's behavior and be confused or ridicule her or, use the R slur, which is a word I hate and do not tolerate here, in case you were wondering. There was a point when I was writing stories, and I never really finished many, but there was a point when queerness and certain topics that perhaps did not reflect God 100% started entering my work. It was a villain character, but in my first story that I felt like I was really serious about wanting to complete, I didn't do it, by the way. I didn't complete it. I do think I got the most written on that one of anything I've ever written, but cannot remember. It's been literally over a decade. There was a bisexual villain who had some gender fuckery in the characterization, and looking back now, there's a lot of things I didn't understand at the time, because it was kind of my first time grappling with the concept of what I thought was someone different from me. A type of person that I viewed as other at the time, despite recognizing my own attraction to multiple genders. and even recognizing a certain fascination with the concept of wearing clothes different from your assigned gender at birth, or the need to experiment with presentation. And I found it became harder to write when it started to feel like something other than God was becoming a voice I wanted to be heard through what I was writing. Growing up, it was kind of always, I'm going to get published and it's going to be some kind of Christian book, some kind of something that points to Jesus, and knowing that anything I would get published would, be a public matter. This was just the mindset I was growing up with, and read and acknowledged by the people in my life who very much wanted me to become a certain type of person that I didn't end up becoming. There is some part of me that deeply fears the Bible and deeply fears representing myself in a way that my mother says God did not create me as. Because the God she serves created me as a woman and straight, and someone who should reflect these beliefs in anything I create, especially anything that I want to be impactful, and especially anything that I want to use to wrestle with the concept of God. My project idea is I want to rewrite the Chronicles of Narnia to be queer. Queer and disabled and full of people of color, full of reflections of people who were not included in the original story. Reflections of people that I believe belong in that story. This is obviously not a publishing thing for obvious, copyright law is a thing, So it's not about being published. It's not about the fear of that kind of shame, of putting hard work into something and putting it out in the world, and to those who raised me, it doesn't look like a reflection of God at all, and instead looks like a reflection of something sinful and poisonous and wrong. And there is a deep fear because somewhere in the back of my mind it's always, what if that is the thing that permanently separates you from God? And some of me is like, why do I even cling to a God who I've been told again and again does not value my existence? I'm told by the church, by my family, by the current interpretation of the words in the Bible, that I am confused. I am a perversion. That God did not call me to be a man. He did not call me into this identity. And he certainly doesn't want me creating something in his image that would celebrate that identity. And I know someone is like, well, just don't tell your parents. Don't show your church. Don't, just keep it hidden. Then nobody knows. Then it's not a problem. Then you don't have to worry about your shame, right? Undo shame for an identity that I believe is real, on one hand, and then on the other, that I believe cuts me off from a God who was very important to me, vitally so, for years. The reason I chose the Chronicles of Narnia is because while there are some flaws in it, it is a bit dated. There are some choices that Lewis made that I do not think he would make in our world today. Whether he agreed with queerness or not, that's not the only issue in some of them. But aside from some issues of time and, a few steps ago in progress in how we represent people, I do think that his depiction of the Christian God is very unique for Christian lit, because a lot of Christian lit is heavily rooted in concepts of piety, of some kind of fragile justice that isn't justice at all. Most Christian lit is, or a lot that I've read, It's one thing to use the words like forgiveness and compassion, and I think it's another to actually understand what those mean. That those aren't pristine words, they're not. You can't forgive if you haven't been wronged. And you can't have compassion if you haven't suffered. I think there are a lot of people who like to forget those things. And a lot of people who like to pretend that forgiveness is actually repentance. And that repentance is piety and purity, and they say forgiveness, but what they mean is avoiding sin. Which, the Bible says we can't. The Bible says that we sin every day, and that's supposed to be the point. And then somehow it became less about forgiveness, and it became more about rigidity and the law and being right or good. And they forget that compassion is supposed to be a word that extends to everyone, to every experience. Compassion is meant to be freely given, and it's meant to be for those who are suffering and who maybe can't I think the Chronicles of Narnia was unique because there are flawed people all over the stories. If you don't know much about the writing, it's full of flawed characters, and they are not necessarily required to go and sin no more. And I might be talking too thinly about something that is hard to fully discuss without, I think, several hours of filming, which is not going to happen. There is a part of me that feels like I am blaspheming God by writing something that I deeply believe in. And I don't know what exactly I believe about God at this current time. It's a complicated thing for me. Because I don't know. God was something real to me for a very long time. And I swore up and down to him growing up that, I wouldn't become gay, which is the greatest sin that you can do, apparently. Not in literal text, because apparently in literal text, it's blaspheming the Holy Spirit is the only sin that can separate you from God permanently. And they're very vague about what that means. And that's totally not something that I over-focused on as a child and freaked out about constantly. It is very hard to almost believe two completely separate things fully at the same time. Because I wouldn't be scared if there wasn't a part of me that didn't believe I am wrong. I wouldn't have shame if there wasn't a part of me that did believe I'm a monster for an identity that doesn't align with everything I was taught from birth to now. And at the same time, the pride and the joy I feel when I'm able to express myself in the gender identity that feels right to me, or I'm able to engage with a sexuality that has always been a part of how I view the humans around me. And that I can hold that joy and pride and immense love and desire to be a part of a community that is supposed to be mine as well. And yet, instead, I'm having to survive in a community that is daily trying to convince me I'm not who I say I am. And it's stupid because I don't even know if what I write will mean anything to anyone. I don't know if it'll have any impact. I don't know if anyone will ever see it except me. So why am I shaking? There is something incredibly fucked up about being raised to innately see yourself as sin incarnate. I have love for God. I have love for what I learned about myself growing up, believing in God. I have love for who Jesus was supposed to be for me growing up. I have love for anyone who builds their foundation of relationship with themselves and with others on the concepts of forgiveness and compassion and love. And the older I get, I can't see how a lens of compassion and forgiveness and a lens of being a child of God, how that lens is supposed to paint me as demonic, because that is what I've been called. I have had people in a church, in a group, pray over me to rid me of whatever demons were causing my mental illness, causing my many sicknesses, my disabilities, and then finally my queerness. And the idea that people who say they love me would call upon God to cast out what is innate to my personhood and being, and that God would want that for me. And that God wouldn't want me to know who I am, even if it's not explicitly written in a book written so long ago that we don't even know who wrote most of the damn thing. God is very important to me, and at the same time, I deeply, deeply fear him, and always have. Because I knew from a little kid, just don't grow up to be gay. Just don't grow up to worship Satan, and don't grow up to be gay. And dear God, don't grow up to be trans. Don't grow up to want to alter your body, because your parents won't love you anymore. Don't grow up to reject the femininity that feels forced on you, and don't grow up to choose a name for yourself, even one that was the same name as one of God's most beloved. I deeply believe in what I want to write. And I know it might not mean anything to anyone. And no one might ever see it. So why does it scare me? Why do I feel like writing the thing that I want to see most in the world fill me with a catatonic fear? That my own family might call me the Antichrist for turning the image of God into something that supports this work of the devil that is queerness. And I know I don't believe that. I know I don't believe that it's wrong. Because I've never seen a clearer example of God's love than in the queer community. Because the queer community is a love that is not bound by gender or race or class, or as the most repulsive Christians would tell you, by biology. It's the kind of love that says, we'll make it work because you can't change who you are. You can't change how your body responds to certain people because of how God made you. And I can't believe I have to believe God made me this way. Otherwise, I am a mistake. I feel so much shame. And it's hard to admit it because the moment you admit that you have shame about anything to do with your identity, Christians can take that as I should say certain Christians, but as a if you're feeling shame, that's proof that it's the devil. You wouldn't feel shame if it was ordained by God. That's what they say. I was arguing with my mother the other day about statistics about trans people. Because she said there is a study that says that transitioning does not help with mental illness at all, which we know is bullshit. There are other studies that, it does actually help with your mental health to transition. But she was looking at specific studies that were done by groups of people who had a specific outcome that they wanted for their studies. I love my mother very much. And my mother loves her God very much. And I've tried to love her God too. And the more I grow and learn, the more I think we don't serve the same God. Even if our gods share a name and a story and a purpose, I don't think we worship the same God at all. The fact that I can't even work on something that's important to me without this overwhelming fear that my attempt to portray love in its purest form that I have found on this earth would be seen as blasphemy. And it's like, why do you try to serve a God that narratively in our society rejects your existence? And I just remember how I felt when I read Narnia for the first time. And how I felt that Aslan was a version of God that would actually love me. Regardless of how well I upkept the law. I'm doing this video on no sleep. I haven't slept well the past couple nights. And I worked a little bit on the Narnia project today. I said in my last video that there's excitement, and there is. There's a lot of that. There's a lot of excitement because I know what I want to see. I know what version of a queer God that I want to write. And it's so frustrating. That's not the right word. I said there are certain demographics that hold shame differently than others. I hold a lot of shame for every aspect of my identity, even aspects that you might not even know about yet. I've talked a lot about myself, but we contain multitudes, you know? It is so deeply damaging to be told your love is wrong. Since childhood, even before you knew what your love even looked like. when your body and the part of your brain that doesn't speak in conscious thought already knows who you are, and everyone around you already knows you're wrong before you even have a name for it. The most harmful thing that Christianity has done was deeply, deeply tie my identity of my humanity to the identity of a sinner. That Christians pride ourselves on calling ourselves sinner. We were created sinner. The fall of man meant that all of us now, our identity is wrong. Inherently, you are born wrong as a Christian because of sin that entered the world, not because God created you that way, but because as soon as sin entered the world, we are all sin. And I can't understand how a God that said we were beautifully and wonderfully made would also look at us in our infancy and say, your very flesh and bones are created sin. And that's without even necessarily being gay. Christianity teaches us that we are born poisonous, and it's only by the grace of God that we are clean. And yet, somehow the only sin that seems to matter is who you love or how you want to change your body to more fit the mind you have. We're created sinners, and we can't escape sin, but I am still the work of the devil if I marry someone with a vulva. Or if I call myself a man after God's own heart. If I dare to take hormones that align my body more with how my brain already exists as, what my brain already exists as. And then if I were to try to pour any of the beauty of queerness, the love I see, the type of love I see, the type of love that says it's not about rules, it's about each other. It's about our umbrella and everybody under it. And it's not about sectioning off and who did it right and who was queer the right way, who was gay the right way, who was trans the right way. It's this acceptance that my body was built to function a certain way. And I have to believe God was the one who made it that way. Because I'm not a mistake. I don't understand how I can so deeply believe myself to be a monstrous abomination. And also believe that there's no way that God makes mistakes. And either I am beautifully and wonderfully made or I am not. Either I'm made in God's image or I am not. Either he made me this way or he did not. You don't get to cherry pick. You don't get to say, he made this part of me and not this other part. I've never been more scared of giving up than when I realized how desperately my self-hatred, that the way I despise myself, makes me want to break everything that I try to grow in my life. And that it would be under pretense of boredom or pretense of apathy. And it would be neither of those things. It would be shame and fear that stopped me. And it's something that might never matter to another person on the planet ever. But it also might. I don't know. I don't know how many people are like me. I don't know how many people need to see a version of God that can love them. See a version of God that acknowledges the love that we have for each other as queer people. And the thought that I could pursue making something to show God's love and my family would call it the work of the devil. Simply because they can't understand they just can't understand. And I love my family. I deeply love my family. And my family deeply loves their God. And I don't know who to blame for the fact that their God tells them they can't love me. That they think what they're doing is love. That they call what they do love. They call their dead naming love. And they call their misgendering love. And they call their entire erasure of my 5-year relationship with 2 queer women that I loved very deeply, and their bisexual daughter. And their daughter, who is still discovering what labels she finds to be most true for herself. And that relationship wasn't real because it was gay. And that we could not have possibly loved each other. Because it wasn't heterosexual or monogamous or cisgender. My one girlfriend was trans. How can I so strongly believe that I'm destined for hell? And that God made me trans and bisexual and queer? How can I fully believe both of those things at the same time? How can I believe in a God that wanted me to grow into a man and somehow also believe that same God would reject me for writing something that portrays him in that light? I have so much shame. And I don't know how to stop shame from being the driving force behind the decisions I make, because if it is, I won't finish this. I won't even really start it. When I first dated my girlfriends, I was so scared to say that we were dating. I was scared to call it dating, because I thought that as soon as the word girlfriend spilled from my mouth, that God would damn me right then and there. So for a while we dated without using the label of dating, simply because I thought that word would cut me off from God. And I'm not in a relationship now. I shouldn't be anytime soon. And I still feel shame for the thoughts and feelings that arise when I see a girl or I don't know. I want to if I'm going to do it at all, I want to do it right, and that is a dangerous thought for me, but I also don't want to half-ass something that is deeply important to me and could be deeply important to at least one other person, whoever they might be. I don't know. I don't know what to do. I know what to do. Just do it. Keep doing it. And don't stop. But I'm so scared, even though I shouldn't be. Because I'll be honest, if God was going to send me to hell, I've already crossed that threshold or boundary or whatever. If I was going there, this isn't going to be the thing that sent me. It was some other bullshit that's happened. I don't want this project to be colored by my shame or my fear. I wouldn't want to do this motivated by something like that. I want to be motivated by my pride. The pride that I should be able to freely feel for my entire identity. I have a lot of things that I want to say on the topic of shame, and I'm also struggling to say anything at all. I've never been so afraid of my own shortcomings. Deeply afraid of my own weakness, deeply afraid of the knowledge that it would take shockingly little for me to chicken out. The fragility of my ego scares me. It's not about ego in like ego, it's more the other definition of ego. Don't worry about it. It's just, my personhood. I have to believe God made me this way. Otherwise, I am a mistake. And God doesn't make mistakes. Or so I'm told. I don't have a conclusion. I don't have a point. I don't have a way to wrap this up. I don't have a string to tie it together. I have nothing but vulnerability. And an honesty about my experience. Because the rule with humans is if there's one, there's always more than one. If I feel this way, someone else feels this way. Probably much more than just one, or just one other one. We are simultaneously more accepting of queerness than we ever have been, and also the people who find us disgusting are outraged at our gall at living as who we are. They are outraged because they find us vile on a very basic human level. A lot of them can't see us as humans, because if they did see us as humans, they would not be trying to deny us medical care. They would not be trying to deny us our right to transition, or our right to make choices about our bodies that are ours to make. Simultaneously, I see more and more queer people who are so are able to be so enthusiastically open with their identity and I see more of the culture being celebrated and being accepted, and you know, and then also it's still hard. People still think that the bathroom thing isn't about just being able to take a shit in peace where you're gendered correctly. Instead, they make it about this perversion that isn't even a part of how we are interacting with that space. I said that in the most roundabout way I possibly could have. I'm so sorry. I could have said that clearer. But it's my identity becomes a religious matter and a political matter, and a matter of, as for me and my household, we will serve the Lord. And the Lord does not want you to be a tranny, apparently. I don't know. I don't know.